Yeah, so far.
Hello. Hello. We are live. I see people in the chat. Well, welcome everyone. We have a surprise guest. Yay! Bethany's here. Hi, Bethany. Tell the people who you are. We have a surprise guest. Yay! Bethany's here. Hi, Bethany.
Oh no.
Oh no. Hold for sound difficulties. Speaking of sound difficulties, mine this week should be okay. I did some test audio and
Got it. It was me. I'm sorry. I forgot I was going to watch it, and then I forgot I had it up in another tab.
oh, well, there you go.
I tried.
Yeah, Bethany IM'd me and was like, "Hey, this is going to be a fun topic," and I was like, "Please come join. This will be good." So, Bethany, you want to tell everyone who you are?
Hi, I'm Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany. I read widely with a heavy emphasis on fantasy and romance and diverse books, and lately I've been on kind of a gothic horror kick this summer. So.
That's true. That's true. Well, welcome. Welcome everyone in the chat. I see a lot of people come in. Oh, okay. Hey, when you list time for live stream, could you put in Eastern time, etc.? Always it's in Central time, what the time I say, which is 8 p.m. Central time, unless you hear otherwise. I will always put that in the community tab if it's different. And it should, if you want to make sure you have the time right, if you set a reminder, like I always try to post that the stream will be up earlier in the day so people can set a reminder so that it will give you your correct time zone. So, but good point of order here. Hello. Yes. Yep, we're getting going here. Hello. We're happy Bethany's here. Hello. My pleasure. Okay. So we got another I feel like I'm not an actual booktube drama channel, but I feel like these live streams are becoming like my version of YouTube commentary on whatever is happening in book Twitter or booktube. So this week we're talking about boundaries with authors and readers / authors and reviewers.
Yeah.
Which is something that comes up pretty frequently. Me and Bethany were chatting beforehand and we were like, yeah, this feels like it comes up every couple of months. Mm-hmm. So there was a recent incident. We can talk about that. Madison says a certain Twitter incident. Yes. But not just that one. There have been a couple like back to back that kind of, I felt like built on each other. Yeah. So yes, there we go. So that's what we're going to get into. There we go. Yep. Oh, hello to Japan. Ooh, exciting. Hello. We're here for the tea. Yes, get your White Claw, get your water, get your tea, get whatever you need. Oh, what do you got? Is that White Claw?
It's Wild Basin, but it's basically the same thing. This one is blueberry mango. They've got really good flavors.
Wild Basin.
It's basically like White Claw. It's like boozy sparkling water, but it's really good.
Fancy. Yeah. Oh, hey, Joshana. How are you? Speaking of Twitter drama, Joshana is usually one of my like sources to figure out the root cause of what's going on. And apparently I'm spreading the good word to other people who don't know what's going on. We got white wine. Okay, so Bethany, do you want to describe the Twitter incident with Fadwa, or do you want me to do that?
Yeah, so it's funny, I saw the author's tweet, and then later I saw Fadwa's tweet.
So you should do that, because I didn't see the original tweet. I only saw Fadwa's response. So.
Yeah. So, okay, so there's an author. She's a debut author, and I think we were going to say too that like this does come up frequently. Most often, I see it with debut new authors or indie authors. Like is where it seems to be most frequent. But yeah, there was an author who sort of tweeted. You could find it on Twitter, the exact tweet, but basically saying, "Hey, it's really shitty for reviewers to like offer to review a book, saying they want to lift up POC voices, and then go and decide they don't like it because it's not the genre they thought it was, and trash it on the internet, and basically called it a scam to try to get a free book. So I was like, I mean, that doesn't sound great. Okay. So
it's a lot of work for a free book, I'll tell you that.
Right. So I saw that, and then a few hours later, I saw Fadwa's tweet, and she's got a sizable audience. She's a well-known, respected booktuber reviewer in the community, basically saying she was the person being talked about. Number one, the issue was that the author allowed it to sound, and especially apparently in her responses to comments, allowed it to sound like this was a white reviewer, not a POC reviewer. Fadwa is not white.
Yes.
So that's an issue. And I had made some false statements as well. For instance, the author was the one who filled out a form asking her to review the book.
Oh, I missed that.
Oh, yeah.
I missed that detail. Woo, okay. The plot thickens.
Yeah. Also, Fadwa had written a Goodreads review, and but she said that like 3 or 4 people had seen it or liked it, and then it kind of blew up after this. In some ways, the author kind of like shot herself in the foot. But basically, the author was like, "Hey, you need," like, emailed her, which Fadwa posted a screenshot of, saying you need to decide if you really want to lift up POC voices or be a critic.
Don't like that dichotomy.
Yeah. She eventually kind of apologized and then just got off of.
Did she?
I mean, not really.
Did she actually say, "I'm sorry"? I forget if the actual words "I'm sorry" were in there, but
like, I shouldn't have said it on, like, vented on here, and I'm sorry for any harm I caused the blogger. That was basically the extent of it. I don't think she admitted she was actually wrong in her expectation.
Wrong. Yeah.
But,
she was sorry that Fadwa was upset, I'm sure.
Yeah. Fadwa handled it really well. Like, I think
she did. She was we should say, we're being very, no, not even we. I am being very snarky in my responses here. Fadwa was, I think, very gracious in her airing of her side. Yeah. Yeah. Much as Bethany is a very gracious person in the way she's describing it, and I'm the one that is sitting here literally painting my nails being a snarky bitch. So. Whatever.
Oh, yeah, that's true. So when she apologized, she said the blogger, and Fadwa was blocked that entire time. That was the other piece of it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Garbage. There we go.
Yeah.
Being able to reply to it.
It was...
okay. Yeah. So that is the most recent one, and it's pretty egregious, so it's a little easier to talk about. But in general, it raises this question of what if anything do readers owe to authors? What specifically do readers who are reviewers owe to authors, if anything? And what kind of is the social contract and social norm of, now that we have this online community and online space where authors, readers, and reviewers can kind of all mix it up together, what are the implications of that? And maybe our thoughts on maybe some rules of the road, or if you're a new author, what we would suggest you think about from the perspective of reviewers.
Well, and I think also, and this is something that I think more, not all, because some are narcissistic, but most more experienced authors realize is that even negative reviews are not all bad. Like a well-written negative review can still bring sales, because just like one person's, like something that's not one person's cup of tea might be somebody else's. Like, I've had negative reviews where I was like, hey, I didn't like this book because of XYZ reasons, because it's not to my taste. And I've had people come back and be like, oh, that sounds exactly like what I like. Great. I'm going to go pick it up. Which is great.
That's, if you told me that you didn't like a romance because, I don't know, I tend to be more okay with kind of especially a protective alpha trope, and you were like, it was too much of that. I might be like, oh, okay, that actually works pretty well for me. That's fine. Even if it doesn't work for you, as long as you're explaining what didn't work for you, it can still be constructive.
Yeah.
So let's see here. I thought Joshana had a good clarification of the Goodreads review Fadwa left to, didn't even star rate, which I star rate my DNFs if I get that far in, but she didn't star rate. She just said DNF, and it was like a 2-sentence, just like, hey, here's why this didn't work for me. It was nothing like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't even see the Goodreads review, so that's like.
Well, I went to look at it because I always like to see, I want to try to understand. I want to see the original case evidence.
Right. As you should.
My detectiving. So I think maybe a good place to start is some caveats about things that authors have complained about or talked about that are legitimate grievances, or maybe things that are legitimate expectations in terms of sort of the social contract between reviewers and readers. And one of the ones that comes to mind for me, especially in this case, because part of what is at issue here is this idea of like POC books or POC authors.
Right.
Books from marginalized voices, let's say, to broaden it a little bit.
Yeah.
I think one thing authors have talked about being a struggle, like, and this is a legitimate struggle in my opinion, are reviewers who, on the basis that they can't relate to a marginalized perspective, review something poorly, or, and I mean, I guess this also gets into what is a bad review. Like sometimes it's not even like, this was terrible, but just more like, I didn't really like this because I couldn't relate.
Right.
And that to me,
I after all of this, I tweeted about exactly that. Exactly that. And like, I think what I said was, which I think is true, is like, if you are reviewing work from a marginalized person and you're planning to give it like, say, less than 3 stars, think to yourself, is this because of the writing craft, or is this because I didn't like or was uncomfortable with reading from a perspective that differs from my own experience?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like do that gut check. Like, it doesn't have to be your favorite book even, but if it's like a negative review, if it's a 1-star or 2-star review, like, consider that.
Well, and this getting into kind of the false dichotomy that this author was drawing versus what we're trying to get at. This author was saying you either can champion POC or marginalized voices in books, or you can be critical. And that is not true. Like, you can still be critical of books representing or from marginalized voices, but because of systemic everything, it is, I think, especially for reviewers who have a platform, really important to check yourself and say, like, what is really the basis of this critique? Yeah. Like, making sure that it's coming from a good faith place and not like, oh, like that's just so outside of my experience or what I'm used to, or what I, if it's like something about religion, maybe what I believe or whatever, like just having that kind of filter or check, and to be, I think, careful about the way you word your reviews. Cause I've seen some good examples from authors on Twitter of, I think, people who are probably well-meaning, but had some microaggressions in terms of their phrasing of their critiques. Like, I think it's worth having some care and consideration about that. Yeah. And hopefully you do that for every review, not even just marginalized, but like.
Yeah. I mean, I do think like if I'm not giving a super positive review to a book by a marginalized person, like I am extra careful about how I do it and why I'm doing it. I mean, like I'm still going to be honest in my review, but like I probably take more care in like considering it before I rate it, and then how I discuss it,
Yes. Well, like here's an example from a very negative review I gave recently, because usually I will DNF something before I finish a book that I really am not enjoying anyway. But I really did not like The Wrong Mr. Darcy by Evelyn Lozada. And one of the things that I had a problem with was what I saw as negative racial tropes for biracial Asian characters portrayed. And I wanted to understand, was that coming from the author's experience and her trying to maybe like reclaim that in a way that I just didn't tune into correctly? But upon doing some research, I found out, okay, well, she is Latinx, I believe, but she's not of an Asian heritage from what I could tell. So that was helpful for me in being able to give that critique of saying, like, I think this is a legitimate critique, because this is not own voices. Like, this is not something that maybe somebody is doing a specific thing with that I just didn't get.
Yeah. Danny's got an interesting comment.
Oh, sorry, I'm way behind in chat, guys. My bad.
One of the most recent
Is it this one? Because this is true.
No.
Me and Danny
her most recent comment.
Okay, yeah, because me and Danny, I think, have great conversations. Like, I always enjoy, like, we have really good back and forth. I always enjoy her point of view.
Yeah, that one.
I think the problem is how these negative reviews are treated. In my experience, ASC have negative reviews that weigh more against their works. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so disproportionate impact.
Right.
Is, I think, a good point.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is part of why I think it's worthwhile to be cautious and like measured. So like, you know, if I'm having a bad week, for instance, like when I read everything, you know, like when I read a book by an author of color, like I might take that into account and like slightly bump the review and try to be as objective as I can be about it. But at the same time, like reviews are valuable tools for readers. And if there are problems with something, or if I don't like something for particular reasons, like that is valuable information. And, you know, sometimes the things I don't like, if I can be like, hey, I didn't like this because XYZ, but if you like this trope or you like this approach to writing or type of writing, you might enjoy it. That's still valuable information for readers. So like I'm not like, I do think it's worth being more cautious about, because I think that's probably true, but at the same time, like, I think there's a lot of value in honest reviews. Like, we're not, you know, and I think this is true with this case we're talking about too, is like, we are not a marketing team. We're not being paid to positively promote these books.
Yeah. Publicist promotes, reviewers review. That's well said. Yeah. And I mean, like, I think it's worth being, so another point, a caveat of an expectation I think is reasonable is, I do think it's reasonable that if you receive an arc that you have asked for, that you prioritize reviewing it. Like, I think that's a reasonable expectation that a review is provided, because that is a part of the marketing materials that a book gets, and there's not an infinite number of them. So it does bother me when I see reviewers kind of hoarding arcs, almost as sort of like a status thing, which I think has been harder to do this year because there's not been like BEA or whatever.
Right.
I think that that's a reasonable critique and like kind of a bad faith way to go about interacting with review copies. So I think that's also a reasonable critique of like, it is a part of their marketing budget in the sense of like, they're giving them out as a part of that effort.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, at least for me, like there's a difference between solicited and unsolicited arcs. Cause like I get stuff sent to me that I didn't ask for. And so I may decide to review it or I may not. But but definitely if it's something I requested, I'm gonna review it.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, like, and I guess this gets into
that a free book is not payment, which is so true.
Oh yeah, where is that?
It's near the more recent, but yeah. Well, and I think this is part of where I think sometimes new authors might not realize this, like kind of the way the ecosystem works. Like books are nice if they're ones that you're excited about, but also like I think you get to a certain point, and FODWA would certainly, I'm sure, fall into this category where like you get a lot of books, which, you know, like, which is a nice perk, and especially if it's a book you're excited about or a book you really love or like a very tight book, that's cool. But you know, it's not it's if it outside of those things, it's not really a huge incentive unless you're newer. I mean, if you're new, then it is. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think there are some books where it's a bigger deal to be able to get an advanced copy, and those are one like so for instance, I know that Arcs of Black Sun have been hard to come by. I don't even know what they're doing on the physical side. I had zero expectation I could get a physical arc of that one,
yeah,
but
I
I
think it's
was
very rare.
yeah, I got an arc when I wish listed it, which almost never happens for me on NetGalley, and I already read it and review it, even though it was more, it's like 2.5 months out, because I knew that that was a really hard book for people to get a hold of. And so I wanted, like, that was one where I was like, I do kind of want to make it a priority, read it early, help build up the hype, hopefully, for it in a more meaningful way, because I felt like that was one where me getting it was a bigger deal in the scheme of things. But to your point, like, at this point, just based on like subscriber count and like my percentages on NetGalley or whatever, if I want a book early, I usually can get it. Like, it's pretty rare I can't get one that I want.
I mean, other than some of the like most difficult to get ones, like
Yes.
and
Or
even
like
then
sometimes
often,
like sequels in a series. Like I couldn't get the next Alona Andrews book because it was a sequel.
mhm,
But some other people did, and that's fine.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of other caveats here.
Um, I do think it's reasonable to expect like a reviewer. Well, I don't know. I mean, I from people have different takes on this. Like from my perspective, like I think especially if you're working directly with an author, I think it's reasonable to expect a reviewer to be respectful, even if they
Yeah.
don't like something. I know there are people who definitely do a lot of more negative reviews, which is something I don't do much of. Like, so,
Yeah, somebody asked me about this a few months ago in chat about like, do you have a problem with people doing negative reviews? And I definitely don't, or like reading books on purpose that they think that they're not going to like. And I was like, no, I mean, like, whatever, it's fun. I think I've been changing my mind a little bit about that. Honestly, and I'm not going to name who, but based on one creator I follow's content, where so much of what they do seems to be purposely reading things that they're not going to like.
yeah.
And they're coming from an outsider's perspective to the types of book they're reading. And it did make me think about that a little bit differently of like, in this situation, like, is this a little misogynistic to purposely be kind of crapping on books aimed at women all the time when it's clear that you just don't like them? Like,
Because it gets views.
because it gets views, and I get that, and like I don't think it's like wrong, but it did kind of complicate my thoughts about like, I don't know that I have a lot of respect, or maybe like I don't, it's not something, maybe let me rephrase, it's not something I would choose to do because I just don't know that that's
I mean, I think
great.
part of it too depends on whether you're seeing yourself as a reviewer or as a comedian. Because,
That is a great distinction. Yeah. Yeah,
because,
that's fair.
yeah.
Like what is the intent of the content you're creating? Is it
Yeah.
to
I mean,
inform,
which
or is it only to
I think there
entertain?
are people who talk about books where I wouldn't consider them reviewers. I would really consider them more like on the comedy side of YouTube, even if it's using books.
Yeah.
So, but
That's a good
that
point.
said, I have seen other people who are reviewers where I am frequently uncomfortable with the way that they handle their reviews if it's from an experience that they're not as familiar with. So I have seen that on the flip side. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and here's an interesting question. I don't think I have, but have you ever reviewed a book a friend wrote or a book a YouTuber wrote? If so, how did you
I
navigate that?
have, yes. You've done a
How did you
YouTuber,
navigate it?
or you have.
Which one?
We read Alexa Dunn's book.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let me think about how I navigated that. Bethany, how did you navigate that?
I mean, I was honest and polite. I mean, I don't know. Or was I even, I guess the thing is too, is like Yeah, I mean, because I've actually done this quite a few times because like I do indie authors as well. And like some of the
Mhm.
people I've reviewed books from I've ended up becoming friends with, or like I've had people who I kind of knew personally reach out to me about reviewing their books, which I'm very cautious about who I say yes to. So because I try to make sure it's somebody where I think I've got a pretty good shot of liking what I'm going to be reading. Um,
Yeah, there you go.
but
That's part of
yeah,
it, I
Laura says
think.
compliment sandwich for friends. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's pretty much
Which
it.
I honestly try to do in most reviews, though, not
Yeah.
just
I mean, I
friends.
try
Like
to
I,
like unless
yeah,
I really, really had issues with something, I usually try to do that as well. Yeah, I mean, so basically, like, I will mostly focus on like, here are the positive things, here are some of my critiques, but here are some more positive things. Um, and
yeah,
I wonder too how you do that. You don't really well, so you just don't review indie stuff unless it's something that you get for yourself. So
yeah.
I wonder
I
sometimes
yeah.
how other people do this because if I'm reviewing an indie author's work that's like reached out to me,
Hmm.
often I will I will often probably bump my rating by like a half star because they're self-published and because I know they don't always have access to like all of the level of editing and like
Yeah. I don't think I'm comfortable doing that, and that's part of why I don't review indie
which is fair.
authors. I mean, I do contextualize every book in terms of what its genre is, so like
So
or
that's
like what the expectation of
yeah.
this.
Which I think, and I guess that's part of it is for me, like if something is self-published, like I treat it like I give it slightly more leeway. Not a lot, like a half star's worth, but like slightly more leeway than I would a traditionally published book. But
Yeah, I mean, I think especially in things like typos or whatever, like that I would give more grace on. But yeah. And Shoshana says luckily enjoyed it but didn't give it 5 stars. Yeah, I mean in the Alexa Dunn one, like I enjoyed it. Actually, I think I probably liked it even better than you or Shoshana did. But I had critiques and um I hope they were fair and reasonably stated, but like it's a book I would still ultimately recommend, and I wouldn't have accepted it if I didn't think, to your point, there was a good chance I was going to like it. I think if you wrote a book, for example, I think I would know there was no way that I could like give a full objective review. So probably I would like get a copy of the book, haul it, read it, but probably unless I just like fully was like 4 or 5 stars, I probably wouldn't necessarily review it because I don't think I could do that. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't want to hurt your feelings.
yeah,
And if I did even if I did like it, I don't know that I could be objective about liking it, you know?
yeah, no, that's fair.
So I
Yeah,
don't know. Um let's see here. Hate review. Yeah, and I think you can kind of tell when people are purposely shitting on a book. And I just don't think that's the majority of what people are doing. Like some people I think are, but
yeah,
yeah. Um Yeah, I agree with you, Deshauna. Like, I
that's
just would
probably a
basically,
good. Yeah, well, like Alexa Dunn's book, I didn't rate it super high, but like I enjoyed it. Like I had fun with it. I didn't dislike it. I had
yeah,
some issues with it, but like it was fun and so be. And also, I realized I was not the audience for it. Like some of the things that I didn't love as much about it were, I think, because I'm in my 30s and not a teenager, and I think she actually writes YA for teenagers, which not all YA authors do.
which they don't. And that was one of the things I actually liked about it instead of like, I could tell that this was aimed at a younger audience. And I appreciate, like, I get excited when I see YA actually written for teens. And I think my critique was more around like, I don't know that this would have been the Austen I would have chosen
Right.
just based on whatever. So, but again, I liked that book. I thought it was fun and I thought that it did what it was trying to do. So
Same.
like,
Yeah. Somebody
um,
asked if we speak with her, just know her from her content. So I met her at BookNet Fest. And
yeah.
I know we're mutually subscribed to each other because she every once in a while will comment on one of my videos. So yeah, then I follow her content also.
Yeah, I know her from BookNet Fest in person. She and I have DM'd a few times. I wouldn't call her like a close friend, but I would call her like a friendly acquaintance. Like if I saw her at something, I would feel comfortable saying hi. Um, okay, so those are all of the like caveats of like, I think most, maybe we'll come back to more. of things that authors can reasonably expect from reviewers, like politeness, good faith, a good faith review. You're not just getting it to shit on it.
Being aware of if your
Being a-
experience is different from that of the authors and taking that into account when you're writing your review.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Margaret. I try to do that, yes.
Yes. Yeah, you're good at the compliment sandwich. What is a compliment you receive about your reviews, and how do you think your reviews can improve? I always want to include more quotations or go more in depth. I think we actually have a pretty different approach to reviewing. So what do you think, aside from the lovely, your tactfulness, which you've just been complimented on, what is something that you think you do well in your reviewing?
So I think well, in terms of writing reviews, because I think you go more in depth with your video reviews, and I actually and do shorter Goodreads reviews, and I write lengthier Goodreads reviews. So I try to, I don't know. I think my goal is to try to give the potential reader of this book, as much information as they would need to decide if it's the right book for them. And I also, because it's what interests me, I will tend to focus on things like thematic content, pacing, overall big picture character arcs, like, because those are the things that I find interesting. Whereas I know there are some people who focus a lot on specific characters, like, well, they'll do like a paragraph for each character in a book. Like, that's not what I find super interesting, unless, like, every once in a while there's a character that I really, really love and connect with, but usually that's not what it is for me. Yeah. And even if I didn't like something, I'll try to be specific about, like, hey, this is my taste. If you like this thing that I don't prefer, you would enjoy this book.
Yeah, I think I have a similar approach, that my goal, especially in my video reviews, is to give people a sense of what the book is like, whether I liked it or not. Unless there's a specific reason I think, like, don't read this, which I very rarely say.
Same.
Even if it's something that didn't fully work for me, I try to acknowledge who I think it would work for. So that's definitely something I try to do. I think I tend to have a pretty reader response driven approach to reviewing. So I talk a lot about, like, genre. The place of a book within its genre is probably the thing that I'm often the most interested in. Like, is it, especially for genre fiction, like, is it subverting tropes? Is it doing something interesting? Is it a good version of what it is? I tend to put focus there. I also tend to talk a lot about what that book made me think about. So I'll kind of take it and extrapolate about, like, well, like nonfiction in particular, I think I tend to kind of riff there. So I think I'm also not somebody who really focuses on, like, this is what happened in this book. Like, because I think that's, for the most part, something the reader should experience for themselves. Yeah. So my goal is to give you a sense of what my experience with the book was like, and give you enough details that you could then kind of project yourself into the book and think, would that be an experience for me or not?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you do a good job of getting across the tone of something, which I try to do sometimes. But I think, like, I really am into, especially in genre fiction, I get excited when authors use genre fiction to talk about bigger thematic issues. And so I talk
especially in, like, sci-fi, fantasy, horror. I agree.
Or romance, like, if they're using it to talk about, like, class or racism or, like, injustice, like, I find that really cool, and so I tend to talk about it in my reviews. Even though I know, like, some people, and sometimes I'll be like, I loved this book. Some people will find it really boring because it's very slow paced and, like, character driven, like, stuff like that, because I also know some of my favorite books are not going to be everybody's cup of tea. So
and I think, I don't think either of us are people who tend to be more on the, like, here's what happened in this book, I liked it or I didn't like it. I think we tend to talk about the book as an experience more than just the book itself.
Yeah.
I think we're similar in that respect to our approach. Though I would say on my Goodreads, I'm much more driven to, like, higher level reviewing than you are. I think you get more in the details.
Yeah, that's true. And
Are
I
you too
also, in my written reviews, I will often, not always, but often include like content warnings for people as well, or like the big ones I notice.
Yeah, I try to do more of my Goodreads like right after I've read it. If I think there are content warnings, that's where I put it because I will forget by the time I do my video review. Unless it's like something like we both read The Night Swim. That was easier to remember what the content warnings on that one were than
Yeah.
some of the others. Whew. Well, okay, we'll come back to this question, but I had the ability to separate their personal likes, dislikes versus whether a book is actually good quality.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good point, but I do just want to submit that it is hard to speak objectively about quality. So I do tend to try to give a sense of quality by talking about the tone, and thinking of it in terms of like, is this going for like a high literary tone and that's a piece of what your reading experience is versus is this meant to be pulpier? Because I do think it's tricky. Like, I don't, okay, this is the book I just finished reading, Let Us Dream by Alyssa Cole. This is a romance that has actually a pretty high literary quality to it. So when I write my review, that is something that I will mention of like, for those of you who want better writing, more themes, whatever, this will make you happy. I don't think that necessarily makes it objectively better than a romance that is not trying to do that. So that's part of, I think, it's good to communicate like, oh, the writing was really hard for me to get through. That's fine. But I struggle with this idea of objective quality.
I agree in terms of like the quality piece of it. I do think this thing of being able to separate like what you can find in a book from your own personal taste is important. But I also think that's something that comes with time and self-awareness. Like when I first started YouTube, I did not have the same level of understanding or language of my own even taste in different things or how to talk about it in a way that was useful. It was more like, this made me feel really excited and it was super fun because of XYZ. And like over time, I've worked at it and developed more language and more ways of talking about like what are the elements of a book and trying to break down, okay, like what worked about this for me. And I think one thing that's helpful for that is reading other people's reviews, including people who disagree with you, because I think that can help you to like pull yourself away from the emotional experience of just how you felt reading it and and this is why I'll usually read other reviews after I write my review because I think it's interesting.
I do too. Well, and also sometimes I'm like, am I crazy? Did I see this? And if I see it in other people's reviews, I'm like, okay, good. It's not just me.
Yeah. But it's like I've gotten to where now like I'm pretty good at guessing like, okay, I bet negative reviews of this book I loved are going to say XYZ.
If there's an unlikable heroine, I can spot that from a mile away. Because she's not, that's another example. She's not relatable. Oh, okay. So,
but it's like time and experience and actually working at it. And I think, that's helpful.
And not to toot my own horn, but this is a good example. Authorial voice. I think that was a term that, I was familiar with, but I used it a lot when I first started reviewing.
And now I use it sometimes.
There you go. Authorial voice and authorial posture are two things that I found to be very helpful terms that I kind of grew into as a reviewer of talking about, okay, this is their writing voice, and then authorial posture to talk about like, it seems to me like the author, beyond just what the characters are doing, seems to have this opinion that they're trying to bring into the text. Yes. Like that was language that I kind of not invented, but like found as I was trying to get better about explaining what I thought about something.
Yeah.
I thought this was an interesting question. Are you, because I think for review stuff, I think I'm not as likely to branch out of something I don't think I'm going to like, because I am aware that, well, first of all, I just want to read things I'm going to like. But if it's a new book that's getting its first chance in the world, like I want it to do well in theory. So I'm less likely to take a chance, but I think you're more open to that than I am, Bethany.
Open to things. I think for me, like I have a pretty good, for me, it's more going to be about keywords and tropes. Like, is it something that I'm interested in, or something that I know I'm likely not. Like I'm not going to pick up something that I am unlikely to enjoy unless somebody I trust tells me they think I would really like that thing.
Yeah.
Or I hear a review of it that makes me think, oh, maybe it's okay. Actually have a great example of this. So, I usually am not a huge fan of time travel sci-fi, like things with like time
I
travel.
am discovering this through Operation
Or
Sci-Fi. I'm very picky about it. Yes.
I don't usually like it, or things with like multiple timelines, like multiverse stuff. It just usually doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this what is it? The Space Between Worlds is a debut novel that just came out that has this multiverse thing. And so when I first read the description, I was like, I don't know if I'm really interested in that. But then it was a book of the month pick, and I went and looked up some reviews, and I found one that was talking about how they're using that as a way of talking about privilege and class structure and racism and stuff, and all these themes that I'm really interested in. So I was like, okay, this could work for me, because yeah, like if this trope was generally used, I wouldn't be that
Right.
into it, but because of the way it's using it, I think I could like it. So
Well, and because both of us tend to be I think we tend to read for themes and metaphor in speculative fiction before we're reading, for instance, for something like cool magic
yeah.
or like cool science.
Yeah. I'm reading it. I'm going to be reading it next month, so I'm excited about that.
It was on my most anticipated books, and then for some reason it fell off my radar. I don't know. I'll wait and see how it goes. Does knowing that you will ultimately write a review of a book take anything away from the enjoyment of reading? Do you miss simpler times of just reading?
I don't know.
I mean, the reason I started the channel was because like I missed being in grad school and talking to people about what I was reading. So that's how I think of reviewing, is just
Yeah.
talking to people about what I'm reading, which I like doing.
Well, and for me, it was that I missed having like a book club with a lot of other big readers, because we had moved to a new city, and so I didn't know other people who were into the same types of books I was. So I actually, from grad school, also like I love breaking down books into their pieces and discussing them. So I will say what I do miss is book shopping, because my experience of book shopping is very different now than it used to be, because now I'm aware of like almost everything new that's coming out in publishing.
Yeah.
And it's harder for me to just like browse and magically find something that I end up loving, because I kind of know everything.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And people like will try to recommend me books and I'm like, I know about that one. Like you didn't I was so excited, Bethany, when I got your books in the mail, because I was like, I genuinely don't know what any of these are. And I was expecting I was going to be able to guess at least one or two of them, what they were. So I was like, oh, you fooled me. Good job. Like, this is so exciting.
I'm kind of surprised you didn't figure any of them out, actually, but yeah.
No, yeah. Well, and I opened one of them up this weekend. I was very excited. So, because it was a book I'd been thinking about. Okay, moving into unreasonable expectations from which we've talked a little bit about, but unreasonable expectations from authors to readers, or let's maybe start with reviewers. Expecting that everybody will like your book is the number one way to set yourself up for disappointment.
Yes.
I mean, there are books that I think are perfect. Like, I literally can't imagine how somebody wouldn't like it. And like, there are 1-star reviews for those books on Goodreads.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
because
like
some people have no taste. You can't account for it. Some people are just wrong. You can't help them with
I mean,
that.
the thing is, I think like if you like any book you think is amazing, like you can go on Goodreads and you can find 1-star reviews of it. And likewise, maybe not all, but many books that you don't think are very good, you can go and find 5-star reviews of, you know?
Yeah, that's true. The converse of ones that I'm like, this has no redeeming qualities.
Yeah.
Apparently someone disagrees.
Like people just have different taste in what they enjoy and what they're looking for, and what bothers them. Because that's the other thing too, is like, well, like I think a perfect example, like when our little group of friends, like different things will bother us. So like Leanna hated Aurora Rising. She had like a scathing video.
A very fun rant review of that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she gave it 1 star. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. And I watched her review after I read it, and like everything she said, I was like, yeah, you're not wrong. It just didn't bother me.
Well, or it can be a question of degree, because I gave that book 2.5 star and I agreed with all her critiques, and they bothered me. It kept me from really loving that book, but it didn't like make me ranty the way it made her.
Well, I think whereas for me, like I enjoyed it, and like I took it as kind of a lighthearted spin off of like campy sci-fi like Star Trek, which I grew up with, and so like it did all these things, but it was trying to do those things. It was fun. Who cares?
Well, and this gets into maybe something, because like something that bothered me in that book that she pointed out, but I think this bothered me even more than it bothered her, even though she liked the book less than I did, was, to me, there was not even close to enough separation between the voice and the different points of views. And that really bothers me, because in general, I mean, I'm not a hard sell on having multiple point of views, but I think you need to have a reason to have like 5 of them. And if they all sound the same, that bothers me more than it bothered her.
The audiobook.
Oh, so maybe that helped.
So and I found there have been a couple of times that I've read books where that was a critique in the reviews, and I had listened to the audiobook and didn't have that problem because there was a cast of different actors. And so I think that can make a big difference.
Yeah,
so I think that's why I didn't have that as an issue.
Yeah. So all that to say, I mean, like even just in that one example, not that Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman need our endorsement or money, but there's 3 different reviewers who all actually agree on things that are like problems with the book.
In the book.
Yes, but then have a different response.
Like we all are like, yes,
degree.
that is objectively there, but we had 1 star, 2.5 stars, 4 stars. So I mean, like I think that's a perfect example of why like you can't expect everybody to like your book, even if you think it's amazing. I mean, some people will, and that's great.
Yeah. And I mean, I've talked about this on here before, but like different ratings mean different things to different people. There are some people who use Goodreads as basically binary, either 5 stars or 1 star, like either I liked it or I didn't. And then, you know, there's me, I would say a 3 star is a good review for me. Like if you got 3 stars, that's not bad. And other people perceive that as being a bad review. Like it's all very subjective. So like a really great way to get yourself real unhappy and worked up is to spend a lot of time reading Goodreads reviews, which, to the title of this video, are not for the author. The author is not the intended audience of a review. It is other readers.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say this, like, if you are an author, please, if somebody has a critique of your book, do not respond in the comments.
Don't do it. If you want to do it,
don't do it.
You need to have a friend, maybe another author friend, but just a friend that anytime you want to do it, instead of that, you text that person or you DM that person, because it is folly. And it is the worst look for you to try to argue with people in the comments of a Goodreads review.
I have had people do this to me.
Oh, see, I've never actually had it happen to me. I've only seen it, and I'm just like,
a couple of times. In both cases, it was male sci-fi fantasy indie authors. And this is why I'm very cautious about which male indie authors I will accept books from. Occasionally I will if it sounds really good and they seem like reasonable, but like I'm like, no, just don't.
Yeah, and I mean, like, even like I would tell authors not even to respond positively to good reviews. I've seen, so I think it also depends on like which authors you follow on Twitter, but I've seen because most of the authors I follow are on Romancelandia, because honestly I just think they have the best tweets. They're good tweeters. They don't even want to be tagged in positive reviews. Like they're like, don't tag me in anything. Like I don't want to see it. So I only will tag like, hey, I just bought this kind of a thing. Like not a review, but just like I saw You Had Me at Ola in Target the other day from Alexis Daria. And that's such a big deal if you can get into Target. It's like one of the biggest booksellers in the world. Like that's such an accomplishment for her. So I tagged her and said like, oh, I saw it in the wild.
Yeah.
But that's not me saying like, I mean, I like that book, but like, that's not a review. That's just me saying like, yeah, your book is out here. I don't tag authors in any reviews just because the authors I've seen have said that they don't want to see them. And I think that that is a really solid position.
Yeah, I mean, I think some are open to it, but I will say, like, on the rare occasions that I do tag authors, it is when they are glowing reviews.
That would be the only situation where I would actually tag the author.
Even if I am mildly critical, I'm not going to tag them because that's all they're going to be able to see. Like some of them, not everybody. What's interesting to me though is like there are some authors who read all their own reviews. They don't comment on them, but they do read them. Actually, you know who was tweeting about this the other day that I thought was really interesting, and I was like, oh yikes, because like I was Kay Ingram, who I love. Like I love her on Twitter. She wrote The Wicker King and The Weight of the Stars.
Oh yeah.
Wicker King, and I didn't love Weight of Stars, but I think a lot of it was like a me thing. But I had like several kind of like specific nitpicky things I was critical of in the Goodreads review. And I recently saw her tweet that she's like, yeah, I know I shouldn't say this, but I read all my reviews. So if you've ever written anything, I've probably read it. I was like,
I mean, it's sort of like how when people leave crazy comments on my videos, even if I don't respond, I've seen them, but then it's like in my space and I can't get away from it. So I don't know. Definitely never, if you're a reviewer, never tag an author in a negative review. That's just an asshole move.
And I've seen people are like emailing them to authors to give their feedback. Like, don't do that.
Yes. Okay. That's another example of about like a reasonable expectation from the author. It is reasonable for an author to expect that you do not thrust a negative review in their face, like under their nose, and try to make them look at it. Like that's asshole behavior, and that is a fair boundary for an author to say like that's not cool.
You are not their editor. If they didn't ask you for feedback or go looking for it, like it is not your job to do that. I like
$15 for the book doesn't entitle you to rub your bad opinion of it in their face.
Yeah. I will occasionally write a review where I'm like, man, I kind of hope the author's editor sees this, but like, you know,
for real. I usually go in on editors more than I do authors because I'm like, where were you? It is your job to cut this extra 100 pages out. This is an interesting point. Authors reviewing their own book, 5 stars. I will say that I kind of view that as like when you're running for student council, like if you don't vote for yourself, why should anyone else vote for you? So I kind of appreciate the sort of like 5 stars, but I wrote it kind of a review.
Yeah, I mean, because I think usually there'll be like it's like tongue in cheek, like, well, I'm the author, I think it's pretty good, ha ha ha. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, like I'll let them have that. Like, sure, try to get that percentage up. Have there been authors who've responded responsibly well to criticisms and improved because of it? Not to my knowledge.
I mean, I've had a couple of indie authors where I did not send them the review, but they sent me their book, and I like purposely didn't email them like, here's a link to the review because I had some criticisms of it, and they reached out to me and were like, hey, thank you, this was really helpful, I'm going to take this into consideration in later books. And I was like, okay, like I'm glad it was helpful. So I mean, you know, but I didn't go pushing it at them. So,
yeah. I've never, like, I can think of some authors who, like, I think it's clear over time the sort of aggregate response to their work has shaped the direction it's gone in, but not like a one-off, like, this review changed my writing in this way. Translated fiction. This is something that on a few books that I have not enjoyed in the last couple of years, I've tried to flag as like, hey, one of the problems I have is the writing. This is translated, and it seems to me like this is an overly literal translation, and that is impeding the quality of the writing.
Yeah.
So I try to err on the side of blaming the translator in that situation. Same way I err on the side of blaming the editor.
Yeah. I don't read a lot of translated fiction. And most of what I've read has been relatively good. But I will say I've seen some things that there are kind of two schools of thought on translation. And one school of thought is you should be as close to literal as possible. And there's another school that's more about like getting the spirit of it and trying to have like the tone of what it would be like being read in the original language, but in a way that makes more sense for the reader. So there's kind of two different approaches, and translators do it differently, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's just there's different approaches, and sometimes it works for me and sometimes it doesn't. So I just try to say like I don't like the approach taken here if I didn't enjoy it. Okay, this is a good segue into one thing I think authors really should not be doing. And that is seeking out readers in the wild and getting into the mix with them. Like, and this maybe transitions a little bit into an article, I think it was Case and Calendar published. So like, if part of being on social media is diving into a conversation, and sometimes that conversation is proceeding with assuming that the like an author or like the people being discussed are not going to get into the comments. And if all of a sudden an author kind of swoops in to a conversation happening and says like, well, my book does this, or like in my book this doesn't happen, sometimes that can go over well, but sometimes it doesn't. And that is the risk the author is taking by getting into the mix of the social media conversation that's happening, especially on Twitter. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of a risk. Like, you might get responses you don't enjoy, because all of us sometimes get responses we don't enjoy when we get in the mix in a conversation on Twitter. Like, that's kind of a part of it.
Or on YouTube. Well, and I think that's true, and I think that's helpful for, yeah, like this comes up sometimes. I think what is difficult sometimes for people to come to terms with, especially, and I think maybe especially for writers, some of some of them is like, if you have published a book or if you are a reviewer on YouTube, you are now a public figure. And
Yeah.
as a public figure, you have to expect there's going to be some negativity. There's going to be some critiques thrown at your way. There's going to be some nastiness and trolls potentially and things. And you just kind of have to like either, I mean, you either develop coping mechanisms or a tough skin, or you get off social media. And
Yeah.
I think if you are a public figure, you can't expect public social media, if you don't put your account to private, to be a safe space all the time. It's just not,
If we could wave a magic wand and make the internet free of trolls and free of bad faith arguments and free of, noise and clutter, wouldn't we all do it? If it was possible, wouldn't we have done this by now? Like, none of us enjoy that.
Yeah.
And the more people you have eyeballs on you, and I mean, I'm sure you can relate to this, Bethany, the more my platform has grown, the more I've had to figure out how to be okay with, like, I think I went on a little Instagram stories rant last night, but like random guys finding a video I made a year ago and leaving comments about how dumb I am and how I don't know anything about philosophy, even though I literally have a master's in religion, because I didn't include Dostoevsky in a beginner's classics video. Like, I sometimes have trouble making my peace with that like I've put something out for people to consume. I totally get that sometimes is hard. Like, I don't like it either all the time, but that's why I have a private group chat, and I rarely respond to those comments. Like, I rarely air them publicly, because that's part of what I signed up for, even though I don't like that part of it.
Yeah. And I mean, and I think recently, especially like as it's grown, I have gotten much, much more comfortable, not just with like, and I want to be clear, like it's one thing for somebody to comment something where they disagree with me or they have a different perspective, like that's totally fine. But for people offensive or trolling, I have gotten very comfortable with just hiding them from my channel. That is a new thing I'm doing.
Because I love it.
like, if this is what you're saying, I don't really care to see anything else you're saying, and I don't need my viewers to see it. So you can yell into the void, and you will see your comment on my channel, and no one else will see it, and that is fine.
Yep.
You know?
I love it. It's like you give
I
me
get,
the view still, and I don't have to see what you're saying.
yep.
And like I try to be mindful of, like, I have a bigger platform than most of the people who do that. So I personally don't screenshot and share publicly what people say. I usually will just hide it from the platform. And usually I don't comment on it because it's part of what I signed up for good or for ill. But I get where authors, especially new authors, are coming from in terms of, like, it's not fun having your art critiqued, or having something you've put out into the world critiqued, or having your opinions critiqued. Like, I get that.
Yeah,
But it is,
I get it. I think I have to remember that, because part of me wants to, like, not have a lot of patience for it, because I'm like, well, what do you expect? You're a public figure on the internet. Of course, that's what you're going to get when people complain about it. But then at the same time, like, I do think, especially as a new author, you probably, they can sometimes be thrust suddenly into that without really being ready for it quicker. Whereas at least with YouTube, most of the time you have a ramping up process that takes place.
yes. Yeah. And I think, that is very, very true. And, I do think that the whole, like, George R. Martin is not your bitch kind of aspect of, like, reader expectations of authors is fair enough. Like, I think I've talked about this on here before. I think it's very easy for us to kind of dehumanize or depersonalize these online kind of entities out in the interwebs as not being real people. Like, this is one of our friend Leanna's biggest pet peeves, is when people comment on your video in third person as if you will not see the comment. Like, it's that kind of a thing. I get that that's, I think that that's a healthy thing to raise, of, like, hey, there's a real person on the other side of that Twitter account or that Instagram account or whatever. Unless they're a bot from Russia trying to undermine democracy as we know it. But sometimes, not always, there might not be a real person on the other side. But I do think that is a valid, like, okay, let's remember we're all people. We all have even the author who we brought up at the beginning of this, like, she's a new author. I am sure she has learned from this. I hope she has. Nobody's perfect. And I think that there can be room to grow. But
I feel like somebody needs to offer, like, intro to doing social media for authors courses or something. Like, give them, and maybe some, I think good publicists are hopefully doing that for them. I don't really know, but because I mean, I do think it's true, social media is a necessary evil. However, book Twitter is a cesspool. You do not have to be on Twitter. You could be on Instagram, which is a much more pleasant platform to be on. And there are authors who do that, who don't do Twitter. They choose other platforms.
And the general guidance that I think new authors are given is pick at least one platform and do it well. Yeah. So if you don't think Twitter is something you want to get in the mix on, it is completely reasonable for you to have just sort of a general Twitter account where you, like, repost cute dog memes or whatever. Like, you get to choose kind of your persona on different platforms. And I think it's totally fine for you to choose a very benign persona that doesn't get too deep into anything that can get you in trouble.
Yeah. Well, and I even know there are some, I know of a few authors who have their Twitter accounts pretty much run by their assistants, and they don't post all the time, but when something needs to get posted, like, they don't do it. They pay somebody else to do it, which not everybody's in a place to do that, but, like, that's another option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that this is even more true for some genres and some age groups than others. So I do think that's true. But like I said, I think if I were an author, if I were going to start a social media presence, I think I would be pretty calculated about what kind of persona I wanted to cultivate, because I think that there are definitely authors who have very like charming personas online that don't open themselves up to a lot of controversy. They stay out of, you know, there's ways to have a real presence without getting into the drama.
Yeah.
And there's also, you know, some people choose part of their persona is to get more into the mix with things. And that I think is a legitimate choice that can also be effective as a strategy, but you have to have thick enough skin to deal with the consequences of that being kind of the type of presence you have, I think.
Well, and I think especially like, you know, there are also authors who have more activist presence on Twitter, which I think there's value to that. But also, the more you are an activist, the more you are going to get stronger backlash. And you just kind of have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, like Suzanne Brockman put out a tweet today, basically that was very political, and somebody was criticizing her for it. And she's a romance author who I think is known for being an activist. That's a part of her persona. And she sort of retweeted it and said, hey, if you don't like this, unfollow me. But I think that's kind of, you know, she's a veteran of that genre. She's probably in a position where that's easier for her to say, like, if you don't like it, unfollow me. If you're a newer author,
that's
you
harder.
know, it's harder. So, let's see here. Seeing some people reference some resources for authors on YouTube. Well, Stephen King, I wish that was all he
whatever
used
the hell he wants.
Yeah. Well, first of all, he could do whatever the hell he wants, and I wish that was all he used his Twitter to do. Let's be real. So, and I guess this is a good point, or maybe how to say this, because I don't want to bring up the name. JKR is at a point in her career where she can let her whole ass out, and like she knows the majority of people are not going to care and will still give her money. And but so there are some people who can do whatever they want in that respect, but it's a very good example of, for a certain contingent of her audience, she will now be forever associated with this one thing. And I think it's worthwhile for authors to think about, like, are you comfortable, if you decide to take a stand on something, are you comfortable being known as the author who maybe, what I would think of in a more positive direction, like, is a huge activist for marginalized voices being heard? Like, are you okay with dealing with all the things that will come along with that? Or conversely, if you have a controversial opinion in a more negative light, are you okay with being associated of like, this is part of your brand? Like,
well, and I mean, I think both of us deal with that. Like, we're both fairly outspoken on our channels about like racism and feminism, and like there is backlash that comes with that, and like you kind of just have to know that that's what you're getting into, and like trust that your people will find you.
Yeah. No, I get, I would say at least one comment a day of like, I liked you until I realized you were a feminist and you like non-white people. Goodbye. And I'm like, okay, goodbye. Like, this is not the place for you. I am writing a book. I'm always writing a book. I don't know if I ever plan on publishing it, but yeah. Trolls are everywhere. Trying to get back up here. You guys have so many good comments, and I feel like I'm just losing them all. I'd love to hear examples of authors you think cultivate that persona well.
Somebody mentioned N.K. Jemisin, which I agree. I think she, well, so she does a great job. Yeah, she's great. She is an activist online. She is usually isn't quick to jump to negative critiques of stuff. So she does a good job of like gracefully dealing with drama. And she has very, very intense filters set up on her Twitter so that she doesn't see a lot of things. And I think even in her bio, like, you know, pin tweet or somewhere, like on her Twitter, it'll say like, hey, if I don't respond, or if like you can't follow me, it's probably because of these more intense blockers I have. Sorry, like basically.
Yeah.
So I think she's a great example of how to be an activist author on Twitter and do it well. Because
Mm-hmm.
you see her usually being one of the people caught up, like she'll speak on things that happen, but you don't usually see her being one who's doing something that ends up becoming a problem.
Yeah, I think she's a good example. I think I'm biased because I do follow a lot of the romance folks on Twitter, but I think that I like the kind of personas they tend to strike. There are a lot of kind of more activist romance Twitter people. So like Courtney Milan, Miss Bev. I love Beverly Jenkins on Twitter. Alyssa Cole. Like there's a ton of great romance authors who are comfortable with having part of their persona be activist, but they're not getting into every hot take on Twitter. And I think that that's, to the N.K. Jemisin point, I think part of having that persona successfully is picking your battles a little bit.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Let's see here. Yeah, this is true for me too. I definitely have people I follow on Twitter who I don't actually read. I do read Roxane Gay, but I do enjoy finding out about her nemesis. Let's see here. Yeah, this is a good point too. I think the kinds of books you write probably also drives how into things people expect you to get.
Yeah. Yep. And Angie Thomas is very outspoken, and she sometimes puts her foot in her mouth, but
yeah, I think that's that's a good point. So. Yeah, I think if you're willing, that's the other thing. If you're an author and you want to do that stuff, I do think you have to be willing to take the L sometimes and say like,
I liked the comment from John Hudson. Dickens, I feel, would still be an activist or calling things out. I think that's true. I would love to see somebody do a Twitter feed that's like a modern Dickens. Like that would be really
I bet that it would. Well, would he also be tweeting about how he's getting his wife declared insane so that he can marry his young mistress?
Ooh, well, can't have it all.
Can't have it all. I got the, you know. Oh yeah, Tessa Dare is great on Twitter. Yeah, and here, on the flip side, every time you talk about feminism or racism, I'm cheering. That's the thing. Like, you find your people. So,
well, it's funny. Like, I knew,
but she would be unpaid tweeting about the workhouse condition, so it will, it balances out.
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, I put up my mid-month wrap up a couple days ago, and I touch on probably, maybe not quite, but like close to 10 controversial issues through the course of this book because of the books I was reading. And I was like, I know I'm going to get dislikes. And I did. I got dislikes. And I think I lost at least one subscriber like very quickly. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's fine.
Yeah. My mid-month check-in, I think I spent a good chunk talking about a nonfiction account of white nationalists. So I knew when I talked about that there was going to be.
Yeah. Well, I had read like Hood Feminism.
Yeah. 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 So I think my general feeling is authors need to kind of stay out of readers' spaces. And I think the number one place that is reviews. Like, you can look at them, but I really don't think authors should be commenting on them, harassing reviewers online or publicly,
or even calling them out. Who was it? I saw somebody do this thread on Twitter, which I thought was really thoughtful and true, of like, look, recognize that even most of the biggest bloggers have way less power than you as an author do. Especially, if you have like publicists and an editor and a publishing house behind you, you might feel like you're being attacked and you might feel like you have less power, but really it's not true. Like,
well, yeah. Yeah, and it's actually the way to actually get attacked is to publicly go after someone, because then you will have even if you structurally have more power. I get that if you have 1,000 people tweeting at you, that's not going to feel good. So like the way to not have that happen is to just not go there. I like this trying to imagine dance with a character limit. That is wonderful.
Yeah, he wouldn't get along with Twitter.
Let's see here. No, I don't need to read it because Bethany let me know why I wouldn't enjoy it. And it seemed like it was a little more women's fiction-y than sometimes I like anyway. So
yeah, that's probably true. That's a perfect example of like the rare time that I will do a negative review. I swear, like, well, other than my Twilight reread project this year, so I guess maybe it feels like I've done more negative reviews to people just finding me, but usually I don't. Usually it's like about one video a year that's like an actively negative review is usually it. Last year film, this year is wonderful.
I've only like once accidentally filmed a rant and then I just broke it off into its own review, but normally I don't get into full rant. It's hard for me to get that worked up about not liking a book, honestly.
I think I get most upset about things when like I can see, which I think is a perfect example of one to watch, is like when I think it had potential to be something I would love, but then did all of these things that pissed me off.
Yeah, that's how I felt about A Gathering of Shadows, which is how I accidentally filmed a rant review of that, because I was like, this had potential, where was the editor? Hello. Have you noticed a correlation between the newness of an author and how likely they are to be getting into arguments with reviewers? Strong yes.
Yeah. It's usually new authors. Or not like you. You are a wonderful indie author who I like to work for, but there are some indie authors who are a little narcissistic and do this more. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think people who've been around longer they like by virtue of the fact of getting. It's almost sort of like when you're submitting to traditional publishing, you like have to build up your rejection pile to just like get a nerd to it. I think it's kind of the same on getting bad reviews. Like after a while, you probably like build up some level of, yeah. Oh, I like this idea.
Or find ways to not see it. Like, I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, just not look at it. I also know some authors who have friends of theirs read their bad reviews and pick a couple that they think are actually like helpful or constructive in some way and then just give them those.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Yeah, people are liking it, but
you know what's funny though?
I agree. This is a getting to be a bigger and bigger issue.
It is an issue. You know what's funny? So in my review, I talk about like the problems with the like token, like the tokenism of having an Asian character, Black character, whatever I want to watch. And I said in my review, I bet most people read this and never even realized they were supposed to be Black or were supposed to be Asian. I can't tell you. I've had several comments of people being like, "Oh yeah, I read it. I didn't realize." I was like.
So that's happened to me a few times where I pick something up and I went and like sometimes I'll go look at the Goodreads shelf and I'll have people see that it's on like Black characters or gay characters or whatever. And I'm like, are there any? And then like I start thinking and I'm like, oh yeah, like I guess, the second assistant who comes in and out of the page once had a girlfriend. Oh, okay. I guess technically there was a queer character, but maybe not.
Yeah, no. Somebody's asking the name of the female vampire book you read. I've been reading a bunch of vampire books.
Is that the one that I sent you through Blind Date with a Book? The Rebecca Weatherspoon one?
Oh, maybe. I have that over here somewhere.
Yeah. I was so delighted that that's what they showed because I couldn't pick it, so I was so happy that's what they gave you.
I read it, man. It was so like out of my comfort zone, but
it's Rebecca Weatherspoon. She's a good author.
I think it's called Soul to Keep. But then I also recently finished reading Certain Dark Things by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, which is like a noir thriller vampire novel.
Oh, I didn't realize it was vampire.
It is. It's vampires in Mexico City, but it's like a noir crime story mixed with vampires. before. You might like it.
Yeah, I might like that. Okay. Thought though, how much of it is older authors that have just not grown up with social media?
No. Mm-mm.
They're all over on Facebook. Somebody was asking about author Facebooks earlier.
No. They're asking if this is a problem with older authors. No, this is a problem with young authors too. It's like people.
It is a problem with young authors, but it is also a problem with older authors. But I think that what they do is they go over on Facebook and they have like these, they think are private Facebook groups that then like the drama from them leaks out. At least that's what happens in romance Facebook groups.
I've seen a little bit of that. I'm less like I'm more on the fringes of Romancelandia, but I saw some of that. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So I do think that there is some of that, but I do think it's like these secret Facebook groups. And honey, sweetie baby, if you think anything on the internet is a secret, then you are fooling yourself. Can I also, so Leanna and I have talked about this before. I think authors would be well served assuming that anything they say out loud or write down is going into the FBI's permanent file of them forever and will never be lost. I come from a perspective of like, accounting was my undergrad. You spend so much time in that kind of a degree talking about like liability, like auditability, traceability. You just need to assume anything I say or do on this channel, I assume will be findable by my employers, my children, the government, anyone. So like, I wish more authors would have a little bit of that perspective of like, do you really want to stand by that in 20 years? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's on there forever. Somebody can find it. Let's see here. What do you do when a book doesn't meet your expectations but is otherwise good?
Oh,
a lot of times that'll end up being like in the 3-star range for me.
Yeah.
Of like, this wasn't what I was expecting, but like once I adjusted my expectations, it was a fine version of what it was.
I do think sometimes it can become a bigger issue when something is clearly supposed to be like a genre romance and it's really doesn't sell you on the romance. I think one that was a good example of this was Real Men Knit.
We had the exact same response to that. Like, this was an interesting set of characters, interesting conflict, but not a romance, or not a satisfying romance, I don't think. Yeah. And this is a nice compliment, so I just put it up there because I like compliments.
Somebody asked what my channel is. I'm Beautifully Bookish Bethany. I know it's a twister. People like, but it's memorable because it's alliterative.
BBB, Better Business Bureau, Beautifully Bookish Bethany. Same diff. What is women's fiction? So there's women's fiction, there's chick lit, and there's romance.
Is there a difference between women's fiction and chick lit?
Slightly, mostly based on the age of the characters. Women's fiction is a little broader, like it can be older women, and chick lit tends to be focused on like younger women kind of finding their way in their careers.
Interesting.
Genre romance, the primary or one of the primary, if it's like a romantic suspense, is two people getting together and having a happily ever after or a happily for now. Usually, not always, but frequently there's alternating points of view between the hero and the heroine, or the heroine and whoever the two people are who are getting together, or 3 or 4, whatever the situation of the book is. So that's the focus. Chick lit and women's fiction, romance is often a component of what's going on, but that is not the main focus. The main focus is on the heroine's development in her career or as a person. So they're similar, but if you're expecting a genre romance and instead you get chick lit or women's fiction, it can be a disappointment.
Marketing, like that is the problem of the marketing team. It's interesting. I recently, like sometimes defining stuff is interesting because like I just read a book, Cry of Metal and Bone, which is like the 3rd book in the series. That's really great. And it's interesting because I would say that the first book in the series was like a fantasy romance. And the second two books have been more fantasy with a strong romantic element, which is interesting. Like, they all do follow a couple getting together, but for the second two books, there's so much more going on. It's not the primary focus of the book anymore. And so it's more like it has a strong romantic element to it, but it's not really a romance.
Yeah, and I've realized that often I like books in other genres with strong romantic elements, even if they are not technically genre romance.
Mhm.
And specifically fantasy, I'm realizing fantasy romance, my favorite version of fantasy romances are ones that really read like a fantasy, but they have a strong romantic element, which to me is something like Grace Draven or Mila Vane. Like, you're still getting a fantasy, but
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
Yeah.
I have seen this, which is to be expected because romance is some of the most culturally responsive books written. Like, the turnaround time in terms of like seeing cultural issues come up in romance is usually a window of like 3 months to a year. So, because the publishing timelines are so much shorter on romance than they are on a lot of genres. So, yeah, this is something that happens in YA too with the bad marketing. Like, there's always expected to be a romance even if there's not one.
Well, and sometimes they say it's like a rom-com when it's really a coming of age story. I mean, I get it. I give it a little more leeway though with YA because you almost never get an actual genre romance in YA. Like, it's rare. Usually it's also a coming of age story.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think people assume if there is a coming of age story, it's by definition YA, which is not true. Because there's also like the Bildungsroman, forgive my terrible German pronunciation there, but like Catcher in the Rye is not YA, but it does feature a young protagonist coming of age. It's just, yeah.
Much like we both, I think that the Hazelwood should not have been YA.
No, it's not. I really don't think that book is YA, and I like it.
Same.
Because I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to catch up. There's so many good comments here, guys.
That's fun. I've been thinking I should really try going live more often, but like, it's more fun with another person.
It is more fun with another person. Not that I don't love all of you guys, but it's more work mentally to have a conversation with yourself that other people are watching as opposed to have a conversation with the person that other people are watching. Yeah, this is something that does happen in movies too. And the marketing department, I think it's hard. The marketing department's job is to get butts in seats or eyes on pages, but like, if you don't find the right butts in the seats or the right eyes on the pages, then it can really derail how the work is received. Thank you for forgiving my German pronunciation. I am Ich nein ein. I don't know what not Berliner. I don't know. I am not a Berliner. I don't speak any German other than like horrible words from the 1940s. Like, I know some of those words, but that's about it from all my historical reading. Yeah, like I don't think To Kill a Mockingbird is YA.
Yeah.
I think it's coming of age. Yeah. Is Simplin and Emily in Well Played?
Oh yeah, you read Well Played.
I did read Well Played. Probably. I don't remember them, if that tells you anything. I don't know. They're not the focus. It's good. It's good, but it's not as good as the first one. I was a little sad. I'm excited for the third one. But we'll talk about that in my wrap up more at the end of the month. I think that was a good example of where the expectations for the genre made the satisfaction with the book a little tricky because the romance piece was the least successful part of it.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay, I avoided this book. I got offered this book and I said no because I had the same problem with the previous book, along with an incredibly entitled main character. So
I
Um,
am frequently disappointed with contemporary like romances. I find I'm getting more and more picky about what I'll request for it.
I'm getting good at parsing the descriptions to figure out if they're actually romances. Like, I spend more time really reading between the lines. I'm also checking who the author is and the publisher because that gives me some clues.
Yeah.
And then if I can, I'll go over to the Goodreads and check and see if anybody is mentioning the fact that it's not really a romance. So I've gotten better at
Well, and like I don't necessarily mind women's fiction if it's like the kind I like. Like I really enjoy Sarah Morgan, for example. She writes great women's fiction because her characters are so good. Like she does top-notch character work. And so I love her books. But
Oh yeah, I like Sarah Morgan.
yeah.
I like her too. She writes good category romances, I think.
Yeah, I haven't really read those, but I've read a lot of her
They're
women's
good.
fiction and I love it. Like her because yeah, and I think that's why. It's because I like her character work is just so good.
Yeah, I like some chick lit and some women's fiction. I just want to know that's what it is before I go into it. And if what I'm coming to it is the romance and that's not what it is, that's disappointing.
Yeah.
Um, the magical system in the Black Sun. So I am not the best person to ask because I am not somebody like Leanna who like sits down and really like gets into it. In my vlog, I'm blogging that one, or I blogged it. What I said was, I tend to notice if there's something like egregious in the magic building or world building or magic system that like doesn't make sense. I didn't find anything like that, and I thought the magic system was really fucking cool. But if you're like super into like it being super consistent and whatever, I'm not the best reviewer to give you feedback on that because that's not what I read for.
With what we were just saying, this most recent comment is interesting to me about women's fiction reading something that made you depressed. Yeah. So this is one thing.
Yeah.
I will avoid anything that talks about grief in a book description. Like, I know there are people who look for that and love it. I do not like reading about grief if I, like, generally speaking. It's
It
depressing.
depends.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, like, I think for me, it's like my life right now, I don't have the emotional bandwidth to read frequently. And so every once in a while, a book will come across my plate that has more of that in it than I realized, and it might still be good, but I'm like, okay, and that was my book for a couple of months. Like, I can't,
Yeah.
I can't deal with it.
We all have like yeah. See, I really like, I think I get excited when I see death of a parent, grief portrayed well, because that's a part of my life experience and something not many of my friends have experienced yet, thankfully. So I really appreciate having that reflected to me in a book because it's something I like. But for instance, cheating, I can't deal with, which is nothing to do with my life experience. I have never been cheated on. My parents were together, you know, like there was never any of that. Like, I have no specific reason why that stresses me out so much, but that's how I feel about that topic of like, I read my one, I can't handle any for another few months because it's just so
like
stressful to me.
Maybe it's like your personality type or astrology or something.
That's true. I am a Cancer sun, so I am very rooted in, and I'm a Cancer sun in the 7th house, which you know.
Yeah.
You should not like that either, though, because you're a Taurus, so you're very loyal.
No, I don't. Well, I don't. Yeah, I don't. I don't like cheating.
Yeah. And none of us like it, but yeah,
No,
no,
but
I
like
don't know why it stresses me out so much.
well, you know what bothers me the most actually is it's honestly it's less just reading about cheating doesn't bother me as much. What bothers me is romanticizing cheating. So like that's what bothers me is when it's like but we were meant to be together. This is my true love, even though I'm cheating to be with them. I hate that. That sucks. I'm like then leave the other person first. Don't.
Yeah, especially if it's a contemporary. I'm like, literally, there is nothing that is keeping you from breaking up with the person you are cheating on. There's no
Nope.
societal taboo. Like, this is not a problem.
Yeah, historical I can deal with a little more because like they're
I can at least understand it.
yeah.
Like, I at least get like, okay, it's 1910, and like, if you get divorced, you are going to be shunned. Okay,
Yeah.
like I can at least understand.
Or like it's the 1800s and you will
You
have
can't.
money and be out on the streets. Like, I mean, you know, like
Or like you legally are not allowed to until I forget when in the 1800s, but like
yeah, so that's like
yeah.
that's a whole different thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, nonfiction, I have such a higher tolerance for hard subjects with because I think I can, when I'm engaging in nonfiction, I'm turning on the part of my brain that's like analytical and like thinking through issues or whatever. I have a lot harder time in fiction because that's supposed to be like,
yeah,
not just for fun, but more for fun than nonfiction is.
Same. Well, especially, I mean, I think what I found for me is that I have the biggest trouble with contemporary fiction that deals with hard issues. Like, I actually love sci-fi fantasy that deals with hard issues if it's not like super contemporary, because for me like the different world gives me an emotional buffer that allows me to be a little bit more distanced from it, whereas like a book I just finished reading that was like very, very good but emotionally difficult for me was This Is My America, because it's first person perspective. So it's like it's like from the perspective of this teen girl whose dad is on death row for murder she didn't commit, and then her brother gets murdering a white girl in their high school, and it's dealing with like white supremacy and racism. It's a lot. It's really intense.
It's too real. I can't. I have a really hard time with that kind of fiction, I have to say. I would rather address those topics in nonfiction than in fiction for me. But I know you like those kinds of hard-hitting contemporaries a lot more than I do.
Sometimes, but like I can't read them frequently. Like this is the kind of book where I'm like, okay, I won't be reading a book like this for a couple of months, but it was 5 stars.
Yeah. Really and good. I have ones that I love, like A Heart and a Body in the World is a hard-hitting YA contemporary that I adore, but when I tell you I literally started crying on like the 5th page and basically didn't stop for the entire book and still can't talk about it without crying, like, yeah, this gets into like going back to romance and tropes that we can deal with. Alpha heroes, I can deal with in descending order from if it is sci-fi or fantasy romance, an alpha is totally fine for me in a romance because I'm like, the heroine is also going to have magically or spacey powers. They can give as good as they can get. Like they're on equal footing. Contemporary, I like it a lot less, but sometimes a protective alpha, maybe I can deal with it sometimes. An alpha in a historical, I cannot deal with because I cannot suspend my disbelief of like, the heroine literally has like no legal rights. Like, so like the more I can deal with harder things, the more abstract the situations are, which is part of why I like sci-fi and fantasy that have those themes because I can handle it more in fiction.
And you have higher tolerance for alpha than I do.
That is true.
Like, because I'm very much like, I don't mind it if the girl is also an alpha. Like,
which I like. That's my favorite version is when they're both alphas and they like. Yeah.
I mean, that's not my favorite thing, but like favorite version, it's like it's my favorite version of alpha. I would much prefer to read either a beta or cinnamon roll hero, but if I have to read an alpha, I need my female to be an alpha also.
Yeah. Which, side changeling, that's often the situation. Not always.
That's true. Yeah.
But often. Alona Andrews.
I've also recently discovered I really actually enjoy romances with dominant women.
Oh yeah, I do like that. I like that. And I do like the twist where it's the woman is dominant, like the man appears very alpha, but like actually has more of a submissive side. I'm into that.
Have you read Would I Lie to You by Eva Lee?
No, but I will at some point. I watched her tweeting about that, and I was like, yeah, that's a book I would like.
No, I kind of loved it, but it's like a dominant it's like a dominant female and then like a sexually submissive hero, but it works out nicely because he actually has more power in terms of like gender and money and position, and it's a historical. So like the fact that dynamic especially I think works really well given.
Yeah, like I can get down with that kind of tension. And I will say I am with you on this because I think this is part of why I can get more into an alpha than you can, Bethany, because as a part of my thesis, I had to read a lot of them. So like I know how bad the alphas can get, and I don't think you've been exposed to really how crazily alpha some of these can get. So I think I've been like inoculated against it.
Yeah. You know what? Part of it is probably because I've been in relationships with men more like that, and it's not good. So I just have very expectations for it as a result.
This is that's the upside of my commitment issues. I eject them far before they get a chance to get that that controlling. Any whiff of that, I'm like, cool, don't lose my number.
I've grown into that, and thankfully, like my husband is definitely.
I was gonna say he's a cinnamon roll, right?
He's not. He's a beta.
He's a beta, but he's a scientist beta. Like I would totally that's one of my favorite hero types. So you're living out your best romance life.
I am.
I do too. This is why I love Take a Hint, Danny Brown, because he's the guy in that one. He listens to romance novels in his little earphones, and then
that was cute. That was very cute.
It's so sweet. Yeah, exactly. We can give you a list to sort of to build up your stamina. I think it would break Bethany.
Look, I do periodically step out of my comfort zone, and
I've recently given you a book to help you to test the waters on your comfort zone. Yes. Yeah, we'll see.
I'm curious.
Cinnamon roll. Like it's called cinnamon roll because it's a hero who like seems like he's gonna be tough based on his exterior, but inside he's like just ooey gooey,
like sweet and soft and sweet.
Yeah, just like I mean, Zaf and Take a Hint, Danny Brown is a classic cinnamon roll. Like on the outside, he's a rugby player, and on the inside, he takes care of all the women in his life. He listens to romance novels. He doesn't believe in like he can't do casual hookups. He teaches boys how to fight the patriarchy.
Yeah.
He's just a sweetie pie.
Yeah.
I also love a grump with a heart of gold. Yeah. Okay, so back to author reviews for author reviewer. Anything we haven't covered that we need to cover? We've covered a lot of ground here. I would say, kind of as like my overall thesis for this, authors would be well served to think before they post anything online, to avoid spaces that are primarily directed towards readers, because it's just not for them, and to understand that the reader, basically to subscribe more to reader response theory, like this idea that the author, which is the opposite of how JKR approaches her trying to control her world so tightly and not being cool with fan fiction and all that stuff, but like subscribe more to death of the author, basically. Like once the work is out into the world, you have so little control over how it will be received, how your words will be taken. Like it is out there, it is going to get a response, and like let that happen without getting too wrapped up in it.
And I think also recognizing that an arc is giving it to somebody that you hope will like it enough to want to hope will like it and hope will talk about it. And that it doesn't mean that they have to love it or give it a positive review. And if it's unsolicited, they don't even have to talk about it at all necessarily. And also that like, it's not, I think also recognize, because I think there's this thing of like, oh, you're getting a free book in exchange, and it's like, well, actually, like, you think about the hours spent reading a book, reviewing a book, talking about a book, posting about it, like, it is often free labor. And I don't, and I think recognize, like, most reviewers are like, they're doing it.
Yeah. It's thinking of it as a professional relationship and not as a personal attack, I think is the right perspective. Like, this person has received a copy of the book for a professional reason, even if their only exchange of payment is that free book. Like, it's a different, you need to treat them, unless it's like a bad faith review, if they are treating the exchange professionally, as 95, let's say, percent of reviewers do, like, you should pay them the same courtesy and treat them in kind. Talia Hibbert actually had a good tweet that I thought I would read.
Oh yeah,
Arcs,
I saw that. This was good. Yes.
she's a queen. Arcs are not some sacred covenant, nor are they low-key payment for positive advertising. They are just a book you give to segments of your ideal audience and hope they like it, or at least find it interesting enough to talk about.
Yep.
Nothing more. This has been an author PSA. And I like that, of like it, or have something to say about it, because there is something to all press is good press.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you are, you have a book that isn't getting a lot of buzz, like, having somebody talk about it at all is probably going to make someone curious about it if it hadn't been on their radar, even if it's a negative review,
Yeah. Well, and this is a good point. Where do you find negative reviews of memoirs? Yeah, that is.
Authors shouldn't engage on that. Do authors engage more on negative reviews of memoirs? Oh, that's interesting.
Well, I mean, I think it's also, I would bet that the reviews on that are easier to become unprofessional.
Yeah.
And be more, and feel at least more like a personal attack.
It's interesting. Like, I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever had I think if I was ever reading a memoir where I thought I was going to give it like 1 star or 2 stars, I'd probably just DNF it. But I've had a lot of memoirs where it was like 3 or a low 3.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, like, it's probably hard for a memoir to get 5 stars for me.
I have some memoirs I absolutely love. Like, that's a genre I really enjoy. I try to keep my reviews on memoirs very focused on the book as a book and not the person.
Yeah.
Because even if I don't like the way they told their story, maybe it was intrinsically a cool life story, but it's about how they told the story of their life, not what they did in their life.
Yeah.
It should be. I could see it being easier for reviewers to get like more personal, like, you were a terrible mother or whatever. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of like one instance where I gave something 3 stars, and part of my issue with it was like the author kind of being a terrible person and then half apologizing for it. Like, it was like a half-assed apology though. And like, I think I was more irritated. Like, it wasn't what they did. It was that they glossed over it and acted like it wasn't as bad as it was. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it's
that's an interesting dynamic.
yeah.
Yeah, and this is a good tip. I think like the number one thing authors can do is find their own people to complain about, to complain to vent to, and just mostly keep that offline.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about ARC etiquette. I think the bottom line is, if you're requesting something, you need to review it, and you should review it honestly and on time when at all possible. If you get an unsolicited ARC, then that's
up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People saying yes, they've picked things up. Negative reviews. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Have a good night. Thanks
Have
for
a good
watching.
one. Um, yeah, I've talked about this in how I review books. Different people have different approaches to this, so I think at this point in the chat, it's probably too late to get into the full thing. But yeah, um, I think I tend to not think of 3 stars as a bad review. I know some people definitely think 3 stars are a bad review.
Yeah, I don't think of 3 stars as bad. For me, it's usually either mediocre or half great and half terrible. And I landed on 3.
And for me, it's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. If there was something I didn't like, specifically strongly didn't like about it, it would be more likely to get a 2.5 or a 2 star from me.
Yeah.
Just like, it didn't do anything. It didn't blow my socks off, but it was fine. Like, it did what I was expecting it to. So, okay. Yeah, there's a lot of memoirs out there. Someone's got to keep those vanity presses in business, and
Yeah.
it seems like the memoirists of the world are up to that task.
I think for me, they're more interesting. The ones that I end up rating higher are ones that are a genre blend where it's part memoir, part something else. So like I think How to Be an Anti-Racist is a great example where it's like a mix of memoir and essays on topics. Or
Mm-hmm.
like, have you read, you should read Wandering in Strange Lands. It just came out by Morgan Jerkins.
No, your review made me intrigued. I liked her original one, but it did feel a little green.
I haven't
Like
read the first one, but I
it's
thought
good.
this one was very good. The last section of it was a little weaker than the earlier sections, but yeah, I think give it a try. Like I think it's really good, but it's a combination of memoir,
Memoir and
like
essay.
ethnography and like historical like
I
info.
like that.
It's a mix. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's often a combo that works better for me than a straight up memoir. Um, how do you minimize ARC solicitations, especially from indies? I have a very clear review policy that I've linked to now and made available, and I say very explicitly how you should contact me. And I found that to be pretty successful so far. I get a lot fewer indie solicitations than I did. I was at a point where I was getting like 2 a day, and now it's down to like 3 or 4 a week. So
better. They come in waves for me. But I have in my like info section basically steps of like here are the genres I am open to accepting for indie reviews. If you want to be considered, you have to send me an email with specific information, including a link to the Goodreads page. And then I'll consider it. And for me too, I'm at a point now because I have so much on my schedule to review. I don't accept more than 1 a month. So that's part of how I limit it also.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing is I would read an indie arc from an indie author I had previously read and enjoyed.
Yeah.
So like if Katie Wilde or Mariana Zapata or whoever wanted me to review, I would be happy to do that. But I just don't. We've talked about this. I can't be the person to give a bad review to an indie book. It just would make me so anxious.
Think, and I think maybe this would be useful for like if you're asking because you're getting them and you want to know how to deal with it, I think learning how to write a polite no email is useful. Like, yeah.
Or I say very explicitly, if you send me an email when I've said don't send me an email, do not expect a response from me. And I've just that's my rule. I've made that my peace with it, and I don't care if people think it's rude.
Like for me though, because I do accept some.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Like,
that's true.
Like I think like figuring out a good way of saying, because the thing is sometimes it's in a genre I accept, but like something specific about the book, I don't think I would like it or it's not interesting to me. And so I'll be like, thank you for your interest. Unfortunately, I don't think this is going to be a good fit for me. If I can think of somebody else who I think might be into it, I might be like, hey, maybe check out these, like maybe reach out to these people. I'll occasionally do that, but yeah.
Yeah, I've had this problem too on Instagram. And I think in my link tree
on Instagram, if they didn't email me and follow the directions, I don't respond.
Yeah, I've gotten comfortable with like I have directions of how to contact me. Yeah. If you don't follow them, I just can't let myself feel bad about not responding because like this is my hobby. So,
No, yeah.
um,
Like I put pretty clearly on like if you know like there are ways to contact me if you're looking for something. If somebody doesn't follow the steps, I just don't respond to it. No.
yeah. And I've had more publishers reaching out to me, and they were doing it sometimes through DMs, which I didn't like. And once I put my review policy up, I have noticed more of them going through my email.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that was a good choice if you have a, yeah.
Margaret is asking, is timing the arc a crucial aspect? Does it have to be forthcoming? Not for me. No, I sometimes will accept things that are already published from indie authors. It's just I have limited it has to be something that I'm really interested in, that I think I'm very likely to like or want to read for some reason, um and it has to fit into my timeline because again, like I only accept one a month, so
Yeah, and I also, so sometimes I get offered books that are really close to the publication date, like they have the final copies and they're sending out final copies. Most of those I say no to. The ones I've said yes to, like for instance, Sisters in Hate, I read recently. I said yes to it, but I told the publisher, I was like, "Hey, it's getting published next week. I won't have time, or 2 weeks, I think. I'm not going to have time to read it before it comes out. So as long as you're okay with me reading it, soon."
I'm on the waiting list for it from my library audio now after hearing your review of it because it's kind of really interesting.
Yeah, get yourself a whiskey or something because it's dark, but it's really good. It's very thought provoking, but it's like a journey. Let's see, what do you do with you had early that you never get to by the time the book releases? I do my very, very best that if I requested it, I read it before it releases, or if I can't get to it before it releases for whatever reason, I read it that month, because to me that's the commitment I've made. I try to be cautious about what I ask for at this point on NetGalley because I do tend to get most of what I ask for. So if I've noticed I've requested like 10 books for September and I still have like 6 to go, I won't let myself ask for any more until I get through more of them. So I don't know how you handle that, Bethany, but
Yeah,
that's kind of my
so
approach.
NetGalley, I'm probably a little more lax with, honestly. Like I don't feel as
Yeah, if it's a
get to it
yeah,
by the release date. I do try to read it in the release month whenever possible.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, as far as physical arcs, if it's something that I have requested, then yeah, I do my best to either read it before release or within like a week of release. Um,
Mhm.
and for other arcs, because like in the past I've gone to like Book Expo and BookCon and then I'll end up with a bunch. If I don't get to something, it just depends. Like if it's something I'm still interested in, I'll keep it on my shelves and eventually get to it. Like I have, a stack of books that I want to eventually read. If not, I'll pass it on, unhaul it.
Yeah.
Somebody else.
Well, yeah, and I think that we should mention that I think I read probably more backlists than you do. Like you read I think you read a
I read
higher
a lot.
volume of arcs, so it would be hard for you to read every single arc you have.
Yeah. Well, I can also get
Yeah.
a lot of stuff sent to me for other things. Like I'll get stuff sent to me.
For
I
Instagram.
also get stuff for Instagram promotion that I'm not required to read, and sometimes I
Yeah.
read it. But like that's not what I'm contracted for.
Yeah, and I've gotten a few books, especially this year, that I got not to read necessarily. There's only, I think, 3 or 4 of them that I need. So my goal is once I catch up with my arcs, which I should be able to do by the end of this month or next month, by the end of the year, I'll go back and read those ones I got because I was interested in them. The time kind of slipped
Yeah.
away a little bit. So do I DNF but still mention them?
I
I
don't
try to finish them. I've only not finished one arc ever. Um,
really. Oh,
so
I'll DNF an arc and tell them I'm DNFing it on NetGalley or other things. I'll DNF if I need to. It's not about not
I am
liking it, but, like if I really don't like it, I don't have a problem DNFing it.
so I'm a Virgo moon and I really don't want that to impact my percentage even a little bit. So I've only allowed myself one ever. It still bothers me knowing I can never get back to 100% on NetGalley. So I'm just very anal about the gamification element of NetGalley, and that is something.
See, whereas for me, I don't care about having a perfect percentage. So, and I've reviewed so many at this point that it doesn't affect it that much if I occasionally DNF them. So
I know, but I can never get back to 100% now, Bethany. I'm trying to look. What's my percentage right now?
I'm never going to be at 100%.
I know, but I wanted to believe I could. I'm at 95% right now.
Dang. Yeah, I'm not. I'm at 79.
You're
But I
under
have
your
like
80. That would stress me out so much. I was there for a while and I can't deal with it. I need like the gamification piece, like I just can't. I
I
can't
don't
make
really,
it
yeah,
happen
I
for
don't really
me.
care. Like, as long as I'm like close to 80 or above, like, it doesn't bother me. Because I
Yeah.
have 25, 30 arcs on NetGalley that I haven't read yet.
Oh, that stresses me out. I can't do that.
But
I
I
feel like
like,
I had 15 at one point and I was like, this is out of control. This is too many.
well,
So
like, but I've read like 168 or something. And
I
so
mean,
it
I've
barely,
read a lot. I've read
let me look at it.
134 right now.
Hold on, let me
I
find
thought
it.
that was more. Did I find it? I feel like at some point I thought it was 170. I must have been looking in a
Okay, yeah.
different
So
place.
I've done 168 and I've been approved for 212. And as far as ones that
I have 7 out right now. I thought I only had 6. What?
and I have DNF'd 11.
Oh, no.
Yep.
I can't do that. I salute you. My life would be happier. I would feel more free to ask for more things if I felt like I could do that, but I just can't.
Yeah,
So,
I'm just not, like, for me, it's kind of like, it's fine. I don't really mind. That's funny.
yeah. Yeah, just different approaches.
Yep.
Um, well, we're at 2 hours.
Okay.
Um, Mara's going to break out in hives. Yes, I'm very like and I know that I'm taking this too seriously, but it feels like I've made a promise to someone, and the idea of not fulfilling a promise to me is really stressful. So,
That's fair. I think I rate NetGalley as like not as serious as a physical arc.
yeah, and I
General
think because
copy, so
physical
like,
arcs don't
one of
have
the
a
things that
percentage
I like,
associated with them, they don't stress me out in the same way.
if what?
Like if there was an not net galley, if there was physical galley and
Mhm.
somewhere there was a percentage being tracked of my grade, I would be much more uptight about physical arcs than
That's
I
so
am.
funny. I'm definitely like, I try, like, I do my best to get to them in the month of review at least, but like, I don't feel obligated to finish it if I don't like it, or I don't know. Whereas a physical arc, if I've requested it, that I feel like, okay, I really need.
Sure, if I've requested it, yes, but like if sometimes I have a few that I've gotten as sort of like, hey, could you haul this? And I'm like, yeah, I'm interested in getting to that at some
I
point.
will say, you know what stresses me out is like I see some people who are on NetGalley and like they have so many arcs from like months and months and months that they've just never gotten around to reviewing. That I can't do. That stresses me out. Where I'm like, I would feel bad. Like one or two is fine. A couple
Also,
here
who's
I
giving
DNF
you arcs at this point?
is fine. But like I really try to read most, if not, like at least most of them.
Right. And that's the thing. You are doing just fine. You are very normal. I am very anal about this particular subject and I don't know why, but it creates like just even having this is I haven't brought this up with my therapist, but maybe I need to. This felt very therapeutic just to say it out loud of how stressed I feel about that. My percentage is under 90. I can't. I'm not an A student anymore. That is, I think, how I'm
You know what,
perceiving
though?
that.
I was the same way in school, though, is it's like I never felt like I had to get perfect grades.
Oh,
So I was the same. So
no. Hmm.
I was the person I was the person in undergrad who would like be very lackadaisical about regular homework and then get A's on all of my tests and papers and end up getting decent grades in the class.
I don't know this life. I probably would be less stressed and anxious in my life if I could get there, but
Yeah.
no, anything that it's like a grade.
I think because I was like, this seems tedious and unnecessary, so I'm just not going to do it. Like that was, and it's a low percentage of the grade, so it's fine. That was kind of how I.
No, I can't do that. No, I can't do that. Anything where I am being graded, I take so like I am such a like it is so easy to get me to dance for you, like dance, puppet dance, if there's a grade or like whatever associated with it. Like on my job performance reviews, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I always get very good performance reviews. But like I go in there and I'm like, I know that I was supposed to do this, this, and this, and like I did this, but there's this little thing because of something that happened in the first part of the quarter, and blah 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 blah. And then my boss always looks at it and she's like, I mean, you're doing great. Like she's always so much nicer to me than I am to myself. And I'm like, but I had these goals and I didn't meet all the goals. And she's like, yeah, I mean, things changed. It's been COVID. It's okay.
Yeah, honestly, I think like, oh, this is gonna sound really terrible, but especially me.
Oh, thank
like,
you, JD Evans. This is me too. I just can't.
This is probably really terrible now that I'm thinking about it, but like me in undergrad, especially, and remember, this was a very long time ago, but I think part of it was me feeling like this is busy work that I don't need to do to learn the material. I'm smart enough that I can just not do it and get able to do everything else.
Congratulations on that level of self-confidence. Because I knew I was smart. Well, I'm not going to say that it wasn't hard for me to do my homework well, and I would get praised for doing it. So why would I not? Like, I would be a good girl and get an A and everybody would love me. See, this is why I'm in therapy.
Wanted to read books for fun sometimes and not just for school, and I wanted to do other stuff, Kiki can relate.
Yes, there we go.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, this is my actual nightmare. I don't know. I would have to write them an email to support and be like, look, bitch, my percentage went down today and it was not my fault. Can I also just mention that what you're describing is very similar to my best friend, and she is a double Taurus sun or a moon and rising. So it is a Taurus thing to like, you're pretty like stubborn about if this is how you want to do it, like that's what you're going to do. So like,
kind of true. I mean, and I would never want to get bad grades. And I just
it's just you
wanted to do it my way.
Yeah. And that's not me. I want the good grades, and if I have to jump through your hoops to be able to get them, then like that's fine.
Yeah.
As long as I'm, if there's that bonus question, man, I want 104, not 100. Like that's just the bottom line. It's just how it is.
So yeah, maybe that's a Taurus thing. So it's hilarious.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. I'm so glad that you could join me. I think this was a much more interesting and better conversation with you in it. Am I gonna do live next week? I'm gonna do live next week if Emerald Blaze has not arrived for me in the mail. If I actually get it on its release day, which is Tuesday next week, then I will be reading that and not going live. So keep your eye on my community tab. And I will let you guys know if we're going to go live, depending on the Alona Andrews gods, because like I need to put that in my eyeballs as soon as possible. Do you have it? What is your most sign up question? What's your most anticipated book coming out for the rest of the year?
Jeez. I'm like so in the weeds right now with all the things I have to review. Like, can I think that far ahead? What is my most?
Well, you've read Midnight Sun. I know that was the real highlight of your new releases this year.
Yeah, it was great. I think it's still coming out in December. I'm probably To Catch a Queen, the new Alyssa Cole book in that spin-off series.
Yes. I just started getting emails from the Avon people for ARCs, and like I'm waiting to give them a couple of reviews for things I am interested in, but then I'm gonna slip in like, hey yo, can you get me one of those? Yeah. That's a good one. That's a good one.
That's probably
And the
I
cover
mean,
is beautiful.
oh yeah. And I
She
know
has
her
great
books are
covers.
always just so good.
I just finished When No One Is Watching.
I want to read that too. I'm excited for that one.
And then I just read this, so it's like an Alyssa Cole month for me.
That's great. Yeah, I don't know. Like I think there's a lot of books that I'm like, I want to see how they go, but I've had so many cases of having second books in series be disappointing.
Let you down,
I'm less excited about them now. So like there's some series that have sequels coming out that I'm like, I'm tentatively excited. I hope it's what I want it to be, you know?
Yeah. No, I feel that. My most anticipated is The Burning God, but it's the finale.
I'm in the middle of
Oh, that's right.
the second one right now. Yeah.
I hope you're getting extra snuggles from your children to help you get through that, because it is.
It's good. It's good. It is a little. The pacing's
it's slower at first, and then you get to the back half, and you will just be like, can't put it down.
Okay.
And it ends on a bang.
I'm trying to think like what all I have. I've got like, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff I'm curious about. Like one book I'm probably gonna start soon is the To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. The author of Aragon is coming out with his first book in like years.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And I'm curious because like the big thing was he was like 15 or something when Aragon came out, and that was like,
and it shows.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I'm just like, I have an arc of it, so I'm like, I'm curious to see how this goes.
I saw that was an audio option on NetGalley, wasn't it?
I got the audio, so I'm gonna listen to it.
Ooh, When No One Is Watching just went up on audio for NetGalley.
What? Okay.
Go request that. It just went up.
Is it Macmillan?
No, it's William Morrow, which I think is HarperCollins, right?
Darn, because I'm like auto approved for Macmillan Audio.
Oh, nice. I get emails from them offering. Anyway, people don't care about this. I'm gonna end us live. Thank you, as says. Thank you, everyone in beautiful Bookish like whoa. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you so much to Bethany for impromptu joining. Check my community tab next week to find out if I've gotten my copy of Emerald Blaze, and therefore whether or not I will be live. I may take next week off, so keep your eyes open there. And have a great night or day wherever you are. Bye.
Bye.